So, yes, here we are. We're live, and it's always good to have Nico back in studio. Last week he was all the way in Durban. A lot warmer out that side, eh, Nico?
Oh, yes. And we also had a view of the sea as I have here, but it was just different, warmer, definitely.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
the ocean is a lot warmer than the ocean here.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
So we're not here to talk about that. We are here, however, to talk about that was then, this is now, when it comes to finances, budgeting, future planning, and so forth. Nico, in terms of an experience that you had as a young man, share with us, please.
Well, during the 1970s, finances were just a lot easier to work with. I had to take a 45-minute train journey every morning to the University of Port Elizabeth, as it was known at that time. And because it was 45 minutes long, I had to buy my newspaper, which cost me 2.5 cents. And I bought the Cape Herald.
Yeah.
And because I was interested in finance, I would turn to the stock exchange page.
Yeah.
And there were hundreds of companies on the stock exchange on those days. And I chose some shares. And the shares I chose were coal mining shares because those days pollution wasn't an issue,
Mm.
but making money from coal was because we exported coal and everything needed coal. Electricity
Yes.
came from coal. So it was a good share to buy because if you bought coal mining shares, their dividends were really excellent. And so that's where your finances went. And I remember the shares cost me 10 cents each.
Did you really buy them, or did you just fictitiously buy them?
I fictitiously bought those, but I tracked them. So
Yeah.
I had them and I knew what the dividends would be, and I built up my portfolio that way around.
Amazing.
And then the company came about called Liberty Life. And I knew that they were breaking all the rules around insurance. So I bought some Liberty Life shares as well.
Yeah.
And those shares split, and there I would have really made a lot of money if I'd actually had the money in my pocket. At lunchtime at university, I decided to go and have lunch, and I would go to the local OK Bazaars.
Mm.
And there it would cost me 10 cents to go and have a hot dog and
Soft drink.
a soft drink. Now, hot dogs were the fancy things those days, not hamburgers. That came later.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So that was how my day kind of went. My portfolio, I built up slowly over time. I got to understand how things worked. Today, that method of working is not going to help you survive, and life becomes more complicated. So, today, if you want to do some kind of financial planning, you have to have more than one income stream. You can't only rely on your salary.
Sure.
As I entered the building today, the receptionist told me that she'd worked at a bank for many years and then the bank retrenched. So if you've worked at a job for 30 years and now the bank retrenches you, what are you going to do? How are you going to get another job? Because you've kind of focused on one kind of job. Now it becomes really difficult. How do you deal with it? So, in addition to protect yourself from that, so today you really ought to build some kind of rental income so that that is an income stream. You need to have some kind of income from investments that you've built up. You need to, in my case, have consulting income. And it also means that I've also got to have assets that doesn't give me an income now, but that will build up with time.
Okay.
So now I'm
Appreciate that.
focusing on capital gain
Mm.
so that I don't necessarily have to pay tax on that.
Okay.
But when I get to the point where I'm going to need frail care, which at this point is 27, 30,000 a month, at that point, that asset is going to be sold and will then provide the capital I need for frail care. Now, that is a lot more complicated
Yeah,
than it was in the days of spending 2.5 cents and 10 cents.
exactly.
And that is where one has to be. It also means that you've got to understand much more about risk. And that is also a new phenomenon. Now, the risks that we have to take today is that the world is much more of a village.
Mm.
So the rand-dollar exchange rate, the rand-pound exchange rate, the currency differences between the Indian currency, the Chinese currency, and the South African rand. Now that does become important.
Yeah.
And I have to understand that concept, and I've got to be able to do some kind of predictions on the world economy
Sure.
if I'm going to maximize my income.
Mm.
I need to understand inflation, because inflation kills your plans on finance planning.
Sure.
And if you do not understand what the dangers are about inflation, you run the risk of losing your investment income. I need to understand how interest rates work
Yeah.
and the damage that they can do to any kind of financial planning.
Sure.
Then we come to the whole issue of politics in South Africa, because what the politicians do affects our planning, it affects our long-term planning. So the government of national unity, I need to understand what's happening there.
Mm.
I need to understand what are the risks
Mm.
and what are the blessings, because that also will affect how I put my financial package together. The employment statistics in South Africa are critical,
Sure.
because that goes to the next thing called gross domestic product.
Okay.
Because gross domestic product, it's not only about my wealth, it's also about the wealth of my country,
Mm.
because that also will affect how my financial planning comes together.
Sure.
And then that will also affect how the shares are likely to perform. Now, shares are likely to perform because your pension, your RAs, are going to be affected by that. Now, that's a lot more complicated
Mm.
than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So it is tough when you're trying to put financial planning together. And that's why I keep saying you need to use certified financial planners. You need to use qualified stockbrokers, because it's easy to do these simple AI driven software programs,
Yeah.
but they are not going to take the other soft factors into account.
Exactly.
And so you should be getting some advice there as well. Otherwise, you can end up with a portfolio that grows at 7%,
Mm.
but when you're living in an environment of inflation at 5%, your wealth is only growing at about 2%,
Sure.
and that's not going to create wealth.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of getting help.
Mm.
It can make a difference,
Mm.
but above all, you can also have a lot of fun.
Exactly. Sure. Thank you so much, Nico. Some very helpful and interesting things to focus on there. And again, just realizing, and I'll never forget, about 5 or 6 years ago, having that conversation about, can you believe it that we're paying as much as we are for just a loaf of bread? Let's just take that. And of course, now the question is, what is a loaf of bread? Because you can buy a bread for 40 Rand, or you can buy a bread for 12 Rand. But still, the reality of how prices have changed, and within the South African context, where we're paying possibly the most for a kilowatt of electricity.
Yes.
That's a big, and it impacts not just your little household, but the manufacturing industry and so much more. So we need to bear that all in mind. Nico, thank you so much for your time, and have a blessed day.
Thank you.